Welcome to the Golden Horseshoe Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, Koukun Unosawa, mortgage broker with Synergy Mortgage Group. In this podcast, we chat with real estate professionals who share their local market insights, future outlooks, proven strategies, and practical tips, all right here in Ontario's Golden Horseshoe. We are here with Dan Stefels from Royal LePage Compass Estates. He's the managing partner there, and he's been in real estate now for over 11 years. Dan, can you give us a brief sort of introduction to yourself for someone who's hearing this for the first time?
Absolutely, and thanks so much for having me on your podcast, Kokan. It's a great pleasure to be here. So Dan Stefels, I've been doing real estate. It was just over 11 years ago. We had just finished. My family had just finished a stint abroad. We had moved back to Canada, and I was working for one of the big Japanese companies. We had set up a software division for them here. We did an acquisition, and the role that I was playing started to become redundant. I had an opportunity to kind of make a transition as a partner in a software firm in San Francisco, or to another big accounting firm, which is the background I came from in Chicago. And my mom, who'd been in real estate for about 10 years or so at the time, she sat me down and said, "Don't take the grandkids away. Can you just try doing real estate?" She said, "I know you'll be great at this." So my initial reaction, candidly, was I wasn't particularly interested. There are a handful of industries in the world that have bad reputations based on some bad actors, and real estate is one of them, right? And one of my best friends is an insurance guy, and it's like there's so many bad actors that exist in these spaces that you can kind of color your own perception based on that. So anyway, so I sat down with her and I said, "Okay, we'll do this, and I'm happy to do this." I said, "But my approach to this has always been I want to be a business owner. So I'm happy to take kind of real estate as the vehicle, but I want to turn this into a company. I want to turn this into, there's nothing wrong with buying and selling houses and commercial and land and all that kind of stuff." I said, "But I want to build something." Um, so it took probably 2 years for me to kind of wrap my head around how to do real estate. And of course, I'd bought and sold homes before and flipped homes and all that kind of stuff in the past. But kind of getting into the nuances of client relationships and client management and the complex cycle of what's going on in real estate. So it took a couple of years before we kind of got our feet underneath us and I understood how to kind of get this started. So I actually started out as a licensed assistant, and then started, doing my own care and my own client base. So it took us, yeah, 2.5 years before I became kind of a real partner with Katie. And inside the Royal LePage world, we have these kind of different award levels, and every real estate company has these different award levels, which don't really mean much to anybody. Except for in Royal LePage, there's this one category called Chairman's Club, and it's like the top 1% of agents across Canada. And being a part of that kind of group gives you access to some really specialized training and conferences and masterminds and stuff like this. So we qualified, I think, the third year in for the first time. I didn't understand and recognize the importance of collaboration and teamwork and all that stuff on a broader real estate level. We very much operated on an island, very successful, very profitable, but we operated very much on an island. So it was a couple of years later where we finally said, like, let's see what there is to offer inside this whole organized real estate space. And we started to participate in even like office meetings, but then all the conferences and all the experiences and stuff. Met some incredible people. But I think the most important part for me was I started to run into people who had a kind of a like-minded mindset. I I've got some crazy ideas sometimes. Some are good, some are bad. But I wanted to be in an environment with a community of people who are like they would challenge what I was thinking and what I was saying and how I wanted to approach a particular client situation or a company organization or team perspective, and really kind of challenge what I was believing and thinking and make me into a better realtor, but also more importantly, a kind of a better business owner.
Hmm.
And kind of got to a point where there was an inflection where we said, okay, so am I a real estate agent or I'm a business owner? And definitely sell real estate. And so I still carry a significant portfolio of clients on my own, but wanted to make that transition to becoming a business owner. So we started a sub brokerage about 7 years ago now, inside the Royal LePage banner, which basically means I didn't want to pay taxes, and they didn't have personal real estate corporations back then. So we said if we can create the sub brokerage underneath the kind of the Royal LePage franchise down here, we would be able to pay corporate taxes instead of personal taxes.
Mm.
And that was very important for us because we were earning a lot of money, and don't necessarily love paying all the taxes just like nobody else does. Anyway, so we made that kind of determination 7 years ago, and in the kind of ensuing period, we've really started to grow what the company looks like and who we are as an organization, and kind of bringing on some partners and associates and kind of putting some real structure together to say, okay, well, what is it that we see for real estate and organized real estate now? What does a brokerage model look like? What does a team model need to look like? What does an individual agent model need to look like? All of those pieces of the puzzle that we've been kind of working hard to build together. So that's kind of been the transition period. Last couple of years, which is no surprise to anybody, have been a dogfight, right? It's some of the toughest real estate markets we've seen in a long time.
Mm.
We've still been able to, we've been lucky and fortunate that we've been able to maintain and kind of, we haven't reached our COVID peaks, but kind of the pre-COVID periods, we're in a very much on a kind of trajectory for where we were pre-COVID. And I think we're probably forecast in or about 5 or 6% growth year over year, with kind of that COVID piece taken out.
Okay. Okay. That's pretty good. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
So awesome. Um, yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there, but I love that the one of the things you mentioned about not wanting to just be in the real estate business, but want to actually be a business owner. Because one of my mentors, one of his big sayings is, if you were starting a restaurant, you wouldn't be the dishwasher, the waiter, the chef at the same time. But in real estate, every realtor starting out, I should do everything myself. I should do the admin paperwork. I should
Yeah.
fulfill the compliance paperwork. But having support, having systems, I think it just makes you that much better of a business owner because you can focus on the high value tasks, right? Let me ask you, what was one of the first things you did to make that transition before the sub brokerage? Were there any like hires you made or any like systems or processes that you started putting in place?
Sure. So one of the things that I did, so previous to real estate, I was in sales operations. So I headed sales and marketing for one of the big accounting firms overseas. And before I left overseas, I started and headed sales operations here in downtown Toronto. So I did my MBA from Queens. I'm a big process systems guy. So what we did is we started, so one of the first things we did, even before I started, is I sat with Katie and I said, okay, we're going to put a big map on the wall and we're going to write out everything that you do, this big web. You do this activity, which leads to this activity, which leads to this activity. And we mapped it all out. And I said, okay, so we want a couple of different markers. And we're like, okay, so which ones do you love doing? Like, what are your
Mm.
passions? What are you really, really good at? And in Katie's situation, I always describe this. She is unconsciously competent. She has no idea why she's so spectacular at what she does, but she is. And so I'm like, well, let's talk through that. So we circled the ones that she loved doing. And then I said, okay, which ones do you hate doing? And we, said black marker to say, okay, here's ones that I hate doing. Okay, and which ones can we offload? So we hired our first assistant, and it was all of the all the black boxes. And it's like, okay, here's the job description. Take this huge mind map, and I've actually done this with some realtors since, but we did this mind map, and here's the job description. All the things I don't want to do is what this person's going to do. And so we hired that. So that was the first thing we did, and that was the job description. Obviously, there was some stuff that we didn't foresee happening, and obviously a lot of compliance stuff, and being a licensed assistant versus an unlicensed assistant, and some nuances there. But that was the first step. But it was, for me, it's always been about step, 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 step. We just brought on a new admin person on board about a month ago. The first thing that we sit down and do, checklists. Here's each checklist for each activity that you do. And obviously most of them have been created, but it's like, okay, so follow the steps. This is not, we didn't brain surgery we're doing here, right? It's consistent, accurate work.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, I think at least from my experience working with the realtors, one of the challenges is that not everyone has that process oriented mindset. Like you mentioned, the unconscious competence is describes actually a lot of them, where they're extremely personable, extremely good at supporting people through the emotional roller coaster of the real estate transaction.
Yeah.
But if you ask them like what is it that you actually do that causes your clients to choose you, their answer is always something very basic, something like it's never clear, but then clearly you're doing something really good to have the results you're getting. Like that answer and the results don't quite match up, right?
Yeah. I love helping people. That's the number one answer. So, and my experience has been, if you ask not a business owner, but you ask a realtor what it is they're really good at,
Mm,
9.5 times out of 10, they'll tell you, I'm really good at helping people. And that's
mm,
amazing, right? And what a great kind of target to have as a human being. I want to help other folks. I would suggest, and I do suggest when the conversations come up, I'm like, so yeah, you're helping them. Of course you are. But I think it goes a lot deeper than that, right?
mm,
You're managing their largest, typically their largest asset. You're helping them transition this huge, life change. And I know when you were in real estate, you sold a fair bit of homes, and you're kind of partners with folks that sell a lot of homes. For us, we kind of forget how big a deal it is when you're selling
mm,
a house. But when you're in the heat of it, man, it's all the couple talks about every day, every morning, every night. And so they just becomes overwhelming to them, right? It's
mm,
everything that they do is selling this house or buying the next one or whatever the case is. And for some of us, it just because it becomes so normal, and so
mm,
we don't spend the time necessarily recognizing the emotional impact that has. So yes, helping people, table stakes, but how is it that we're going to do that? And
mm.
yeah, that unconscious competence is prevalent in our industry, no question.
Yeah, like one of the ways to transition that is exactly what you mentioned, like the value of writing down what it is you do and to then highlight what you like to do versus not like to do. Um, I think that's genius. Like I think everyone who runs a business should do that. Just like you do 100 different things every week. What matters? What matters that you don't like, and what
Yeah.
matters that you do like, right? And really,
But I think I think we take it to the next step. So that's kind of on the real estate side, but then you start talking about the business owner side. And any person, I would suggest any real estate agent that does, a couple 100,000 GCI kind of gross commission, they're going to be doing 10 different jobs,
mm,
right? And so each job that they do, they have to wear a different hat. And we all have 40 hours or 80 hours or 120 hours a week of time, and how you choose to allocate that time.
mm,
And one of the struggles that I have, and this is a daily struggle for me, is so I've got a wife and kids, and I love spending time with them and friends and social life, and I play volleyball and like all these things. Well, how do I allocate my realistically 75 hours of work I do a week, right? And I'm going to wear this hat. How long do I wear it for? And if I'm going to wear a hat for so let's just say, well, lead generation. I'm going to put my lead generation hat on, and not
mm,
necessarily just for me, but for kind of for the team. I'll put the lead generation hat on, and I'm going to wear it for 3 hours, 4 hours, in that week. Versus somebody who does lead generation all the time, they can put that
mm.
hat on. They're wearing for 12, 14, 15 hours.
Yeah.
Well, they're going to do a heck of a job, a lot better job on lead generation. So when I look at what I do really well, one of the things I think that I do, I don't think I know that I do well, is kind of helping mentor and grow folks. So I have one-on-ones with everybody in the organization every week, and we sit down and we dig into the nuances of what it is that they do. And we don't necessarily just look at spreadsheets and CRM and calls and stuff. It's like, okay, so here's where you are, here's where we want to get to. How are we going to help you get there? And what is it that we can do as an organization to help you? And kind of give a little bit of that, inspiration. But because I spend so many hours a week doing that, you get better at it just by
Mm,
default. I don't spend enough hours with my video hat and wearing and doing, great marketing videos and TikToks and doing all these crazy dances and stuff, right? Because what you water is
mm.
what you're gonna grow. And so growing those particular areas, and you have to make that decision. So anyway, that's one of the struggles that we have on the business owner side. And I talk to a lot of, very successful real estate agents, and that is maybe not the first thing that they say, but after about 10 minutes of conversation, they recognize that, yeah, it might not be top of mind for one, but my struggle is, but that absolutely is, because everything comes into how do you prioritize and what is it that you're really good at versus do because you have to.
I think prior to even us pressing record here, one of the interesting things we were briefly chatting about there is the importance of doing, putting in the reps, putting in the time when you're starting something, right? So
Yeah.
even like if you were, so say you had to do a refresh, say you life didn't go the way that it has gone for you. You took
Sure.
that opportunity in California or wherever that next opportunity was, and it's 2025. You're back in Niagara, and you're starting in real estate. But by some stroke of luck, you have all the experience, not all the experience, all the information that you have now. You've done your research. You know all the tools that exist. If you
Yeah.
were getting started right now, what would be different if you were starting with a blank slate without having the reps that you've put in over the last 11 years?
100%. And what a great question. I think the first thing that I would do is I would identify a like-minded mentor. I would interview with the people who are where I wanted to be. And I would have conversations with them and I would understand, okay, so what is it going to take? And I mean, we've got so many brilliant, folks down here in Niagara, and some of them are all over social media and some of them aren't.
Mm,
So I would spend some time and I would identify, okay, who is it that I feel most aligned with from a um, work ethic perspective, from a values perspective, and I would say, okay, here's the person, and narrow it down to two or three, pick one, and then go all in. And I would identify there's what it is that I know. And so if I started now at 46 with kind of a family and kind of where with the kind of the responsibilities, if we can use that word, that I've got now, um, well, it's all going to be a grind, right? So every day is a grind in any kind of a career, but certainly real estate. And especially in real estate, one of the biggest challenges for all of us, it's every day you wake up and it's like, okay, well, I'm starting with a blank slate. Basically, I've got nothing until I create it. So every day I'd be in the office for certainly by 9 o'clock, ideally beforehand, and I would prospect like crazy.
mm,
When I first started in real estate, I did 5 open houses a week. I did two Saturday, two Sunday, and then at least one during the week in the afternoon or evening.
interesting.
And I just, as much as I could, I sat there, I met as many people as I could. And I'm a big believer in that. I would also, every time I do an open house, you would line it up with door knocking ahead of time. So I would do little postcards. Hey, we've got this open house we're doing this weekend. And I would talk to the neighborhood.
Mm,
So if I was part of a team that carried a fair bit of listings, which is who I would imagine I would go to, I would just kind of go through each one of the 30, 40, 50, 60 listings that they have, and I would just do 5 of them a week. And I would just keep going that circle around. And I don't care if nobody shows up to the open house. I'm doing the reps. I'm
mm,
having the opportunity. I would sit with the people on the team that had the greatest degree of success in open houses. So I'm a believer that there's a process, and when I sit and train people how to do open houses, there is a process that works. But I know what that process was. I'd say, hey, Susan's going to be the best open house person on this particular team. We're going to take her. I'm going to learn everything there is to do for that. I'm going to role play. I'm going to do all that stuff. But I would do all those reps, and then boy, I would be doubling down on the calls every freaking day. There are so many opportunities that are just lying on the ground from lead generation,
mm,
and people just aren't making the calls. And from our perspective, we generate 50 leads a week. Let's call it 50 leads a week. Nobody's making the required number of calls to those leads, but nobody's clicking on Instagram or Facebook or Google ads and answering a series of questions if there's not some interest in something.
mm,
And we would double down on the leases, because leases come in and people are like, it's so much work for a lease. Yeah, but 3 years from now, that person could be a buyer, right?
mm,
3 years from now, you could teach them how to save money and get to a point where they can get the down payment that's required to now buy a house, right? And then they've now bought a house and it's okay, here's where we're going to save enough money to buy an investment property. And then it just starts compounding, right? And who is
mm.
it that you know? And every client should turn into 4 or 5 new clients. But yeah, it would be a shock to the other folks on this new team that I joined how much this 46-year-old dude is going to work. But that's what it would be.
Yeah, I think, yeah, and I love that answer, but it also highlights some of the areas that I see missing in real estate because I deal with a lot of realtors, right? Just over the course of my
For sure.
business. Um, and I notice one of the key differences between the people who are doing really well and maybe those, not necessarily that they're not doing well, but it's like they're struggling. They're struggling to gain traction, gain momentum. It ties exactly to what you said. One is like the volume of work they do, like the volume of open houses, the volume of outreaches, and then the speed that they react to an opportunity, right? Like some
Mm.
of the best, like the busiest agents I know are almost immediate in their response. And sometimes like, look, you didn't have to respond to that. Like you could have done the other stuff, but there's a sense of urgency that they go about their work versus like some of the agents I work with, like I know clearly you do a couple of deals a year. You got to have more time, but it'll take a day or two to respond to. Sometimes I'm like, hey, like that client was fairly interested. Like that was the opportunity to kind of move them forward, right?
Yeah.
How do you address that? Like even within your team, or when you see like a newer agent that doesn't yet have that urgency, do you feel like that's something inbuilt, or do you think that's something that can be learned?
What a great question. So actually, one of my mentors in the industry, Sean Ziegelstein out of Toronto, he he's extremely successful. He's been doing it for many years. Every time, and we do a lot of referral work back and forth between us. Every time I send him a text message, every time, doesn't matter if between probably I'm an early riser, so and so is he. So kind of between 5:30 and 9:30. So 5:30 a.m., 9:30 p.m. If I send him a text message, unless he's in the middle of a putt, I get a response back from him within 15 minutes
Hmm.
every time. And I once we were sitting down and we're having a couple of beverages. And I'm like, how is it that you do this? And his answer to me was striking, and I've adopted it as my own. He said, no matter when you're going to deal with it, you have to spend the time dealing with it, whatever it is, good, bad, indifferent. He says, but if you wait, you see the message come in, and then you're like, I'll deal with that later. You've now spent the brain energy and time to look at it, think about it, and then you're going to decide to address it later. He said, so unhappy clients, and that's the hardest one, right? We all
Hmm.
have, you have, I have unhappy clients. And you see the phone ring and you go, ah, do I really want to talk to this person? And you're like, no, I'm going to wait. And it's like, well, no, that's not how this works, right? You do it now because you deal with it now, you address it now, and then you can worry about everything else. And so when I talk to the team, one of the things is the CRM system we use is great for tracking time. And so we get a lead that's or an appointment that gets generated, and you see when it's generated, and you can see the lapse between when they pick up the phone or when they send a text message or whatever. And that's one thing we talk every week in our team meetings, and certainly on the one-on-ones, is what is our time to lead? Right? Every piece of data out there will tell you how important it is. And the number of times that we've delayed and not reached out, and then eventually they do, and the person's like, oh yeah, well, we just decided we're working with some other agent.
Hmm.
It's shocking how many times that happens.
Hmm.
And so I think that's the biggest catalyst for us, is seeing where the seeing where that failure is and where those missed opportunities are, and being like, okay, well, we don't want to let that happen, so time to lead is the most important. Because we all know in the world and kind of the market that we are in right now, uh, there's not a ton of buyers. There just aren't. So when there's one out there, boy,
Hmm.
everybody's going to be fighting for it. And you and I both know the one who's going to work the hardest is the one that's going to get it.
Hmm.
So you got to be able to outwork and outsmart and outmaneuver everybody else to be the first one on the. Because if they're clicking on my ad, they're clicking on everybody else's ad too. It's not just,
Hmm.
oh, wow, Compass Estates or whoever. It's going to be, they're clicking on a bunch of stuff because they're in the market. So
Yeah.
you got to be fast.
And the most interesting thing is speed is not the same as experience, right? But sometimes the more experienced agents are faster. When you would think that, hey, if I only have two clients to work with, I should be faster at responding to them than anyone else, right?
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it is one of those things where learning that urgency. I remember the first back in the days of my real estate days, the first brokerage I was part of, they had this rule: you can't not respond to a client. I think they had a 24-hour rule. If you get an email, you get an inquiry, you need to respond to it in 24 hours. It doesn't matter how important that inquiry is, right? If
Yeah.
it's a past client or a client that's just asking you something, you need to get back to them within that. I would say that's even long now. Like at this point, like
Crazy long.
yeah, but as a backstop, right? Just don't
Yeah.
let it go that far as the
Your
worst case
fail safe. Like it
scenario.
cannot go. Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and now it's like, yeah, within. Now it depends, right? Like we're on a podcast right now. If I get a message right now, am I responding? Probably not. But
Yeah,
within, yeah, with the shorter time period you can put, it just creates the experience, at least from the client side, of like, hey, this person is just on top of their stuff, and then it gives them a taste of what they can expect if they were to choose to work with you, right? So
that's right. And even if the answer is that's a great question, and so I was dealing with a really emotional last night, as a matter of fact, and I made a rookie mistake. It happens every now and then. I put an irrevocable on a deal until 11 o'clock at night. I'm like, what in the world am I doing 11 o'clock at night? Like, I got to be in bed way before that. Anyways, I got caught up in the moment and I did it until 11 o'clock. So, but it's like 10 o'clock, 10:30. And I'm like, so now we're dealing with the situation. I'm talking to the agent, I'm talking to my clients, all these things. And it's like, even if I don't have the answer or I don't know what it is, their sense of comfort in the fact that I'm responding, because so this situation, the deal unfortunately didn't come together last night. Hopefully will today. But I was talking to the client. I said, so here's what information I have, but I don't know. And so it was like just before 11 o'clock when the offer expired. And I was like, okay, so here's an update. I don't know anything else. Go to bed. We'll talk, pick it up in the morning. But the sense of comfort. And if you look at the text message string, it's like, I'm reaching out, I'm reaching out, I'm reaching out, I'm reaching out. And so then they're responding, but I'm proactive because this is the only thing that they're thinking about, right? They're sitting at the couch. Maybe they have the TV on that they're not watching, but that's all that they care about,
yeah.
right? So if you're not being that responsive and being that person, then, well, what's Dan really doing for us, right? So even if I was working on two other deals at the same time, they don't need to know that. That's irrelevant to them, right? All they care about is that this is the most important thing that's happening. Now, to be fair, the other two deals were done well before midnight or 11 o'clock because that's just crazy time. But yeah, that's the
I,
from my perspective.
I love that you brought that up. I've been mentioning this to a bunch of the realtors I work with. Somehow they don't seem to be on the same page about this. There is no reason in a revocable, especially for example for a financing condition. 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, no lender is giving you an update beyond that. So I can be working, but the lender I'm working with is not giving me any new information. So like if we don't know by 5 p.m., we're not gonna know at 8 p.m. So like
Yeah.
you might as well just shorten it. You know, everyone settles. If you need more time, you ask for more time at 5 o'clock. You don't ask for it at midnight, right? Um, it is one of my pet peeves. It's like I get that real estate can be a 7 days a week, like working until midnight type of job, but there's a and this is more for the realtors than for me, right? Because I will find out by 5, and I will be sending my
Or not.
fiance there,
Yeah.
or not, right? But
Yeah.
for the realtors, it's like, look, you can balance your work and your life if you try to set some reasonable expectations that I think most reasonable people would accept. Look, we're gonna end things at 6, and we're gonna know by then. An inspection is not happening at 6 p.m. at night. We're doing it in the morning or the afternoon. We'll have the response. Like, anyways, it's one of those things. I feel like I remember I had a property I was selling, and I had a financing condition. I accepted a midnight irrevocable, and they called me at 11:30 to let me know they weren't getting it. And I'm like, there's no way you didn't know this. Like, it didn't have to wait. And you're waiting on the phone. You're like,
Yeah.
no response. Especially the worst is the no response. It's like the last day, the last couple of hours, I'm asking for an update. I'm asking, there's no response, no response, no response. And then finally it's like, oh, sorry, we're sending you a waiver or a mutual release, right? And I'm like,
Yeah.
this would have been great to know like 6 hours ago.
I'd be drinking for a different reason.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
So let's shift gears a little bit here. Before we go into a bit about the Niagara market, and I know you guys definitely do a lot of work here. Uh, while we're talking about business systems and building a business, AI. AI is a topic that you've spent a lot of time building within your business, exploring different ways to incorporate it. Um, let I guess let's start from a broader perspective. What are some of the bigger changes you're seeing in how real estate professionals operate that AI is forcing you to change or giving you an opportunity to improve by changing? If there were like bigger sort of trends that you see, what would the most memorable ones be?
So it's interesting. So after having done this for 11 years, some of the new agents, they don't know a world before DocuSign or
Yeah.
AuthentiSign.
Yeah.
right? So electronic signatures. So electronic signatures were a game changer for us, right? And for me, that was probably the biggest change that happened inside the industry. Instead of me having to go at 11 o'clock at night
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
somebody's house and getting stupid signatures or initials on a piece of paper, um, so that was a game changer. So I look at AI. I expected that AI was going to have that same kind of impact on my business immediately.
Mm.
So 3 years ago, I was at a conference in the States, and people started talking about AI, and they're like, "Oh, this is going to be changing the way we do business." And I was excited. I'm a technophobe. I was the Japanese company I was working for was a technology company we started here in Canada. So I love it. I'm a geek. I'm not at all techie, but I don't code or anything, but I love technology. And
Mm.
so I really started digging into it. And we had one of the team members, Stephen, start learning how to code. But I would go to AI conferences and I would AI podcasts and all these kind of folks. And every time I sat there and I watched some of the details, where it started 3 years ago or so, it would be like, okay, here's this problem set that you've got, and here's how AI can fix it.
Mm.
Was exciting. And I looked at these problem sets. Okay, this is your issue. This is the tool that you're going to use. This issue, this tool. This issue, this tool. So because I'm the kind of person that I am, after the presentation, I go up and talk to them, and I'm like, "Hey, this is what you do. I'm very happy to hire you to be a consultant, and they're very happy to have me hire them as a consultant." But we sit down and we have the conversations, and I'm like, "Okay, so before I sign this $25,000 check over to you to fix these problems, I need some concrete examples of how this is going to work. I'm a pretty
Mm.
bright guy. How does it work?" And they would start talking again at kind of 30,000 foot level. And I'm like, okay, 30,000 isn't going to cut it. We need to get ground level. Like specifically, I'm in this CRM, I have this data management system, I use this accounting program. Like, how are these things going to work together? And what ended up happening was they're like, okay, so you're going to use this tool for this tool for this tool for this. This is the one that's going to kind of tie them all together. And I looked at them, I'm like, okay, but what happens when one of these tools has a change or there's something different in it? And they're like, well, then we kind of have to rebuild and reconfigure the whole process. And I'm like, well, that doesn't make any sense. Like,
Mm.
why would I spend all this money and all this time only for one of the seven tools to change? Especially inside the technology world, especially AI. It's like every minute the stuff is changing.
Mm.
So I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. And so one of the big disappointments that I had, and we invested an enormous amount of time and money into building these things, what we're left with after all of that were Zapier integrations. That's it.
Mm.
That was a whole that we spent all this time and money, and all we did, okay, there's a workflow inside our CRM. If this happens, there's a connection to this thing, then it happens. I'm like, that was a ridiculous situation. So we decided we need to switch gears. And we said, okay, so instead of AI solving these big process issues for us, how do we compartmentalize it?
Mm.
We're going to have this tool fix this problem and nothing else. We're not going to pretend that it's going to fix all these other things. We're going to have this thing. So, as an example, my ads that we run on social media, we were writing our own ads for the longest time. I hired copywriters, I hired marketing companies, I hired advertising companies. Nothing was working the way that I wanted it to. So I'm like, okay, well, AI can do that. And so we have an AI tool that does our ads for us. Great. But I don't pretend it's going to do anything else. And then I've got an AI tool that is going to identify the ways to do the advertisement. So there's a copy ad, there's a distribution AI
Mm.
tool, and then there's a follow-up AI tool. None of them talk to each other. And we're starting to build some of those connections inside our CRM so that there's a little bit of it, but we're like, okay, here's the pieces that happen in isolation. We look at, so we do a lot of commercial work in some of the large complex projects. We actually just did one for region of Niagara, our biggest ever one, and it may not be big to a lot of folks, but it's a $5 million deal for us, which is a huge deal for us. But we built our proposal based on the 10 or 15 other proposals that we've done. We kind of used it, put it together, and okay, here's the different parameters, and AI helped create based on all the other content we had 80%, maybe 85%,
Mm.
and then we just kind of had to massage the rest of it. That's a huge time saver for me. Each one of
Mm.
those proposals probably took 12 or 14 hours to create. So now, instead of 12 or 14 hours again, it's like,
Mm.
okay, now it's like 2 hours, which is a massive impact for us. But again, it's happening in isolation. So for me, what I see is happening next is I see two big things. It's going to be a or an AI tool that's going to start putting those pieces together. That's going to not just do all of my lead generation and lead follow up, in isolation, but it's going to be one tool that does all of it. Because
Mm,
5 different tools isn't going to work. It's got to be one. It's a one tool that's going to do all of that piece. The impact and the danger and the risk to us as an industry is as soon as there's a tool that accomplishes that for us, now we're redundant in that particular
mm,
space, right? So if we've got an AI tool out there that's been built that is going to do all lead generation, there'll be
mm,
an early mover advantage, which I'll be a part of. And I'm like, okay, we're going to generate a whole bunch of new business based on this tool. But as soon as
mm,
it becomes popularized and everybody can subscribe to it for $300 a month or whatever it is,
mm,
then it's no longer a competitive advantage. Now it's table stakes. So now you need to find other ways to stand out and to differentiate yourself. So the opportunity exists for that to happen. The risk is there's lack of differentiation. And then again, the opportunity is if you're creative and smart and you're looking to do things differently, you're going to create what the next opportunity to differentiate
mm.
is. So that's where I see it happening is it's going to be new full process pieces that are going to be single tool that are going to be managed hopefully internally. They'll start being managed by an AI company, but they'll be managed internally and then creates additional opportunities for us to do other stuff. Number one. Number two is it's going to be the back end process stuff, administration work,
Mm.
all of our lead forms, or not lead forms, deal forms, all the
Yeah,
transaction forms. I
compliance. Yeah.
mean, these days our forms is just millions and millions of pages of stuff, right? And so much of it is still so manual. And it's like, do we really have to follow each one of these manual processes? But it will. And same with the accounting side. So the bookkeeping, all my expenses, all that stuff. So it is going to be those pieces, which are kind of the behind the scenes stuff, but that's a time intensive, maybe not, senior level folks, but it's more junior level folks. The challenge is that when you have a job that you can pay 20 or $25 an hour to, how much you really going to spend on that tool that's going to automate that
Mm,
whole process for you? Because 20, $25 an hour, $40,000 a year, am I going to spend 100 grand on a tool that's going to
yeah.
no, because
Yeah.
it's 3 years worth of runway for a person to do that job. So that's their kind of the risk on that side. So it's almost like this. And I've talked to folks who build AI tools, and it's like, how do you marry those two things? And it's like, okay, here's an opportunity to build something, but who's going to buy it?
Mm.
And none of these guys are building it altruistically. Everybody's, hey, I want to build these tools to sell the company or the tools or subscriptions, whatever. But it's like, how do you kind of marry those two things? So anyway, that's where I see the future going for AI.
So far, and I'm definitely a novice in the AI side of things. I've only been exploring it briefly, but one of the things that I saw was this the start of AI agents, where you. Anyways, this is what I briefly learned. I'm not an expert in it,
Sure.
but
Yeah, yeah.
there are these tools like I think the software is called N8N, where you connect it to one of the large language models. You connect it to a couple of different tools like Gmail, like your CRM, like a Google Sheet, right? Whichever tool, and you create a set of prompts that are built into it, and then you have it as the it's almost like a project within the LLMs where it knows all this background info, and then whenever you ask it to do something, it will reread the background info to be able to do it a little bit better. Have you explored anything like that, or have you looked more into the pre-built sort of AI tools where a company's already created it specifically for real estate agents or business owners?
So I would say the third option is
Okay.
folks who are building them themselves. So I'm not building it myself. I haven't got this skill set or the bandwidth for that. I also don't want to just buy a pre-built tool. So
Okay.
I'm working with a couple of different folks who build them, who have the skill set,
Okay.
who are building them themselves. That's an interesting kind of model. My concern on that one is it falls into my second problem set is how much are you willing to pay to solve that
Mm,
problem? Because if you hire an assistant for $50,000 a year
yeah.
that can do all of that for you anyways, and is not going to have to worry about prompt mistakes, who's never going to call somebody ma'am, who's a sir, like there's some of those
Yeah.
things inadvertently, right?
Yeah.
Um, that would be where I would see. So it's an interesting concept. Where it becomes important is scalability. So now I'm
Mm,
thinking about large brokerages. So whether it's, Royal LePage overall that's going to take a tool like this, or Remax or Coldwell or whatever, that's going to take one of those tools and kind of implement it. But it would have to be at such a significant scale in order
mm.
for it to create enough value that somebody's going to say, I'm going to spend my hard-earned money in one of the worst real estate markets we've seen in a long time to fix this problem that I don't really have because I'm not doing a lot of deals anyways.
Definitely some truth there. Definitely some truth there.
But again, that falls into that second category. There's a huge opportunity for it, and we're addressing it. You didn't ask the question I'm going to answer anyways, but we use a VA out of
Okay.
Philippines, and we pay her I think $800 a month, and she works an enormous amount for us. And okay, the quality isn't as good necessarily as somebody locally, but for $800 a month, you know. I can withstand some errors and mistakes that one of the other admin folks is going to QA it here and make those adjustments. So again, my cost side even goes further down on some of those kind of routine activities. So
Yeah,
it just adds another layer of challenge.
I completely agree with that. Even the idea that administrative work can be done by an AI, but I personally feel that you're better off having a really good administrative person on your team who then
Yeah.
uses AI to be more efficient, get more stuff done. But like you mentioned, they get to be the quality control, right? Sometimes if the AI makes a mistake, they get to be the human in the loop before it goes to the client, before it's put out on social media or whatever the task is, right? So like,
Or more importantly, is fixing it. So
mm,
when mistakes happen, and they do, right? This person is able to be like, so even if they didn't catch it and the AI missed it, VA missed it, admin missed it, I missed it, and then it goes out. Well, now we got to fix this problem.
mm,
Well, it doesn't always have to be Dan fixing the problem.
yeah,
We can have one of the admin staff that's like,
yeah,
hey, you know what? They get on the phone, they're like, you know what? We screwed up. Sorry. AI is not going to do that, right?
yeah,
So and that's one of the concerns I would have in that space is having a great admin staff, admin team member, whatever, who's like, yeah, I've got the emotional intelligence to recognize there's an issue and how we're going to help fix it. Huge benefit.
yeah. I think the advantages though will move towards small teams, right? I think I think there's like I have a hard time imagining a solo agent competing at a high level with what a small team, even if it's a agent with a really good admin that's working well together using all these tools. I think that's going to be hard to compete with just as an agent with AI tools. Maybe it gets better. Maybe someone figures that out and that becomes a multi-billion dollar business because they're able to provide that. But I can see where I don't know, how do you see the real estate industry moving? Like, do you think there's going to be more value in smaller teams versus I know Canada doesn't have a whole lot of immense teams, but like I know down in Florida there are some like real estate teams that are like the size of brokerages, right? Like hundreds, thousands of agents. Like, where do you see it playing out where some of these advantages do they go to the say the team of 5, team of 10 versus the larger sort of teams of 100 plus agents?
Yeah, and I would agree. I don't. So there was one team in Southern Ontario that was really big, but they've even scaled back significantly based
Mm.
out of Hamilton, right? So the Remax team they scaled back, and I think they're down to like 25
Oh
agents
wow.
now. So and they were at like 80. So I think there's a different question about kind of the brokerage model and team model and how that works and profitability and kind of all those good things. Um, but as far as kind of where the direction is going, so I'm a firm believer that the traditional brokerage model is broken.
Mm.
So there was a big scandal a few weeks ago, obviously out of Mississauga. There's a brokerage taking massive advantage of its agents and its clients, and defrauding them, and all kinds of huge problems associated with it. For me, that highlighted a big gap inside of our regulatory body. One of my biggest concerns is when I look at how real estate is done, and I've done a lot of research on this, a lot of research about how real estate is done, organized real estate is done across Canada, States, and then in Europe and Australia. Every time that any industry, not necessarily real estate, is self-governed,
Mm.
there's a tendency and a propensity for that to become corrupted because we're all looking at each other and we're saying we're doing the best we can, we're good people, and it's a couple of bad actors that can spoil it for everybody else. And
Mm.
so in BC, what has that been now, 5 years ago, 4 years ago, I guess there was a couple of bad actors in Vancouver. They messed up, there was fraud that they did, it was a bad scene. Within 2 weeks the government came in, they ripped out the entirety of organized real estate. They rebuilt organized real estate and plopped it back down in front of the agents and said, okay, this is now how you're doing real estate. So as much as us here in Ontario think that we've got this, very robust body and governance system and da da da, 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, whatever it was, recognize maybe we're not as robust as we think we are. The government very easily could come in and just be like, "Whoop, that's not working. Forget that. We're going to put this in." And so there's a huge risk because the people who are building that typically aren't real estate agents. And so we
Mm,
talk about in Ontario here, we've got the Trust and Real Estate Services Act, TRESA. I have a huge issue with the name because if you're calling something the Trust in Real Estate Services Act, that means that there wasn't trust before because there is now, which I take offense to because I'm a pretty trustworthy guy. But we've got these phases and these trajectories. So I believe firmly that we're going to be heading in the direction that BC does, where you're not able to do multiple representation at all in any
mm,
situation or circumstance. I see a situation where we're likely going to start having commission caps, dollar amount caps, like they do in some of the other provinces. And I think that phase three of this is that they're going to be phasing out buyer agents entirely. Now, I'm a believer that there's a huge value associated with a buyer agent. You're helping negotiate, and it provides a level of independence that you don't have if you deal directly with the listing agent or in multiple representation. Do we need to do it better? Yes. Is there need to be proper guidance and independence checks and all of the things? Absolutely, there does. But there's a situation where the public needs to understand what it is that we're doing, how we're doing it, why we're doing it, and we're doing a bad job of explaining that. So when I sit
mm,
down in front of somebody at their kitchen table, and this is, what the job is really is sitting down at kitchen tables, and I'm explaining to them what the role of all of this paperwork is and how it all works together and all these things. Their question is, why is this so complicated? Right?
mm,
And my answer always is because there are some bad actors that exist that are doing things inappropriately that are messing it up for the rest of us. For the lion's share of real estate agents out there, they're doing things by the book and they're doing it with good intentions. It's the small minority that mess it up for everybody
mm,
else. Um, so, what needs to change? What needs to change from my perspective is the brokerage model needs to become much more of a business process outsourcing. So they need to be the ones that are handling trust accounts and make sure that they're being audited properly and all the kind of good stuff that comes along with that. Transaction fidelity of documentation, all of that kind of stuff. So I believe that the brokerage's primary focus needs to be that compliance driven and keeping us out of real estate jail stuff. And then it needs the training, support, mentorship needs to move on to the into the team environment.
mm,
I struggle seeing a situation where individual agents, solo individual agents, are going to be in a position to compete long term. And there are some great solo agents out there that do an enormous amount of business and they're extremely good at what they do. But it's going to become harder and harder and harder to compete.
mm.
So when you look at competing against one of the members from our team, right? Well, we've got a substantial infrastructure that comes behind us, and we sit down in a competitive listing situation against somebody who's just there by themselves. Maybe they got some cool AI tools, barring a very strong relationship connection, right, or background or referral. If it's just cold, it's going to be hard for a solo individual agent to compete. So I think that there's a great opportunity, a significant opportunity. We're seeing it more and more for people to kind of partner up, and they're going to be okay. Well, instead of doing this on my own and wearing 10 different hats all the time, we're going to start partnering up and being in a situation where we're going to do it collaboratively as opposed to in a conflict situation. So I see that, and that's going to come from a training perspective, a mentorship. Anybody who's new coming into real estate right now, to start on your own and be like, okay, hey, I got my course done, and it didn't teach you anything about how to sell, didn't teach you anything about how to get a listing, didn't teach you anything about door knocking or open houses, and you're like, hey, let's sell some houses, and they're like, well, okay, now what? You show up at the
Mm.
office the first day, you get your business card, and you're like, hey, now what? So that's where I see the future of it going. And I firmly believe that there is a place for full service, large scale, big brand brokerages. Obviously, I'm associated with Royal LePage. But I don't know that that has to be the only option. I think that there is an
Mm.
opportunity for kind of the cloud brokerages and some of these profit share revenue models and all. I think there's enough for everybody to be a part of. I just think we want to be really honest with each other about what role and what value they're going to play
Mm.
and where it is that we have gaps and just have an honest conversation. Say, okay, we need compliance people to be really focused on compliance.
Yeah.
So we're a brokerage. I've been audited twice in 7 years.
Oh, wow.
Twice. How is it only twice? right? Now, obviously, I say obviously, but our books are pristine. We have no problems. We had our just finished our second audit just now after 7 years, and the issues that they had were like, oh, your Facebook isn't entirely compliant, or your, stuff like this. You didn't transfer out interest from this account to that account quickly enough. Fine, but there was obviously no fraud, no documents, no
Mm,
paperwork missing. But it's like, well, that's fine, but how is that not happening every year? I
mm.
could have been, any brokerage could be siphoning money and using it inappropriate and all that kind of good stuff. And it's like, well, that's a problem. So we need
Yeah,
to get really, really focused on identifying and find a lane, identify the lane, and then stick in that lane.
gotcha, gotcha. Yeah, definitely. We covered a lot there. Um, just to quickly round things off, you you work in Niagara. You and your team serve a lot of clients, right?
Yep.
One of the things we had briefly discussed prior to us recording is that the role of the GTA buyer buying in the Niagara region. Now, obviously, it's changed over the years.
Sure.
There was definitely a peak to it during COVID, but I guess for someone living in the GTA currently, if they're considering moving to the Niagara region, what does that journey typically look like in general? And then when you and your team are supporting someone through a move like that, what are some of the ways that you've found you've been able to help that go more smoothly?
For sure. So I think it's important to kind of categorize the audience first. And so when I think about folks that are, I'm going to call them kind of GTA people who are downsizing. So they've had a job, and our heat maps, and we've done all the data analysis on this, is Etobicoke, Mississauga, or is the primary ground for folks to be coming around to Niagara when they're retiring, downsizing. That's the primary audience. Obviously, people move to Niagara from all over the place, but if we can segment that particular audience, the the timeline from first conversation to actual purchase and move is about 18 months. So it's a long cycle. And the reason for it's a long cycle is there typically it's two people in a partnership in a relationship. Typically, one of them retires before the other one, and
Mm,
it's actually pretty evenly split which partner retires first, which is interesting. But the first person to retire is the first one who says, "All right, we want to move. I want to go to Niagara. I want to go to the wine country. I want to do golf. I want to do walking trails. I want to do all the stuff that we have down here to offer." And so they start looking at houses. They start looking at developments. They start looking at new builds or resales and understanding what the kind of the nature of the marketplace looks like. One of the biggest changes that happened, and I would even say it's pre-COVID, is the number of GTA agents that are coming with their clients down to Niagara and learning alongside their clients about what Niagara has to offer has spiked dramatically. I
mm,
would say pre-COVID, we would have, because we sell again to a lot of folks who are downsizing, we would sell probably 50 or 60% of our stuff. Our inventory would be sold to people who are coming without an agent. Now it's more like 15%, 10 or 15%.
mm.
So there's a whole bunch of reasons for that. But the agents are coming along with them around from GTA. They're learning about Niagara as they come. And it's taken about 18 months. So a lot of GTA agents don't have the kind of the patience for 18 months because it's a lot of trips coming
Yeah,
down over a course of 18 months, and it's an expensive process. But it takes about 18 months. The way the process typically works is, and we have a lot of conversations with folks, once they've identified, they're like, okay, we're comfortable working with somebody who's local, which of course we always encourage. We work with agents from everywhere, but it's okay. Let's identify where the key geographies you want to be in. Right. So every one of our 14 municipalities down here offers something different and unique. Right. And you're going to go to Port Colborne or Fort Erie or Niagara Lake. Those are very different pros and cons around lifestyle, price points, all that kind of good stuff. And so we end up saying, okay, where do you want to be? Where do you want to be? And then, okay, so now I've identified one or two areas. Inside that, here's what new looks like, and here's what resale looks like. And again, pros and cons on both sides. You could take new, you could take resale, or you could take retrofit. And we do a lot of folks who come down and are like, okay, we want to retrofit this home into something that we're comfortable with. So we look at, okay, so what are the pros and cons of those things? If we start narrowing it down over the course of that 18 months. Typically, the last 6 months is when things get really serious. But by that point, we've said, okay, these are the two areas. This is the type of home that you're really looking to identify and move into. And that's where we can start focusing our time and attention on. And whether it's myself or Katie or one of the team members, it doesn't really matter. We obviously work as a team, but it's okay. So, how do we identify the exact right spot for them? one of the biggest changes that's happened in the last 3 years is obviously interest rates are all over the map. People who are moving down are interest rate agnostic because
Mm,
most of them own their home and most of them without a mortgage, and most of them are looking to make the move down here. So they're not worried about getting a mortgage and qualifying for a mortgage. They're worried about their house selling.
mm,
And so what ends up happening is we end up working a lot with the agents up in those areas because, of course, we don't list up there. Working with a lot of agents up there, and we'll refer to one of our referral partners, or they have an agent or friend or whatever that sells the place. But we work hand in hand with that person to make sure that we understand what the process looks like and timelines, and kind of make it seamless and cohesive. But that process is long. The other thing that's a real change for folks, especially at Tomoka Mississauga, if you're coming down and you want to do either resale or retrofit, there's rural properties here that have a huge amount of attraction. But if
mm,
you're coming from downtown Mississauga and you've never had a septic system or a well, like these can be intimidating. They're
mm,
not, but they can be intimidating. So it's like, how do you educate them on what this process needs to look like? And especially during the boom, GTA agents would come down and they don't understand the socioeconomic differences between the different markets. And they're like, we're going to overpay in a market that's traditionally been a lower price per square foot because, wow, what a great deal in this market. Oh, we can buy this house at Niagara Lake that's, 1.2 and we're going to only have to pay 800 or 900. Well, versus somebody who's local would say, well, that's probably, except it's only like a six or $700,000 house, but you're going to overpay because you just don't understand the nuances.
mm,
But the agents, the good ones, and there's a lot of good agents that come down to sell houses. They'll do the research and understand kind of what the nuances are of those different markets. And the good agents out there, and there's a bunch of us, we're happy to have conversations. When somebody's coming down or like, hey, I've got a client that wants to do this, it's my mom, it's my whatever, we'll end up doing things together with them because
mm,
together there's a lot more value. And I know a lot of agents don't love doing work together, but I'm like, collaboration is key. This is this person's biggest investment, the biggest thing
mm.
that they're going to be doing. If we can be in a situation where we can help them hit the easy button, we want to do it because that's only going to be good things for us from a karmic perspective, but also for the client.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Yeah, I definitely love the idea that, or I love the fact that you're so dialed into, okay, who is the person moving down here? Where do they live currently? Which markets are they coming from? What is the timeline that it takes for them to find the ideal home? What is their situation that's causing that timeline? I feel like those are the insights that come from years of experience. You don't learn that overnight. Like it
Yeah.
comes from probably working with dozens of clients where it's like we have to wait a year and a half because one of the partners is still working, but we still want to see homes. We still want to paint the picture of what that's going to look like, right? So,
Yeah.
uh,
And it's funny in our team we have this running joke, and it's like we have bills to pay next year also, right? Of course we want to do deals right now, but we're gonna have bills in a year and a half. So as long as you continue to stay top of mind and you keep
mm,
adding value to them as they're working through the process, it doesn't matter how long it takes. Right,
mm,
and it doesn't take much to add you onto a newsletter, to drop you a call, once every 4 or 5 months. These are easy things to do to
mm,
maintain that relationship. And they're like, oh, of course. And I was just interesting. I was just talking to somebody 2 days ago as I go through my client list every 2 weeks. I go through and I make all the calls I need to make to folks that are in my pipeline. And she's up in kind of Kincardine area, and so she's got a house listed. It's been listed for like 3 years. She's really frustrated, but she made this comment to me. She's like, Dan, you're like clockwork. Every 4 months, you reach out and you have a conversation. And she says it just makes me feel so important that you continue having those ongoing dialogues.
mm,
And we've had some frustrations with the agents that she's been working up there, and we kind of talk through all that in a very independent way, but we talk through and listen, let her vent and listen, because everybody who's going through this process these days has got some challenges, and so we let them have that experience. But the baseline and the standard is always Compass, Dan from Niagara. We're the ones that are going to help you out once we overcome the hurdles that you've
mm.
got over there.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, so I know we've gone a little bit over time here, but let's wrap things up with a final question. This is more on the personal side of things. I know we've covered a lot in terms of your journey on the real estate side, business building, but I'm sure as much as you've achieved during this time, I'm sure it must have come with some hurdles along the way, some challenging times, right? Um, so the question is this. What is one life lesson that if someone you deeply cared about was listening to this podcast, if it was a piece of wisdom or a life lesson that you've sort of earned through the ups and downs in your journey to this point, if there was one life lesson, what would that be?
That's great, and this is actually an easy answer because it's something that has kind of steered my existence. It's easy to say my family is the most important thing to me. It's
Mm,
easy to say whatever category and whatever topic it is the most important. What's hard to do is to look at your calendar and look at your bank account, and do those two things corroborate what you say your most important priority is? So if I say my family is the most important thing, but I don't spend the time and I don't invest the time with them, it's not. If I don't invest the money that I'm supposed to invest or I need to invest in them, then it's not my most important priority. So for me, it's all time and money, the only two things we have a lot of control over. And time, obviously, all we all have the same finite amount of it. If you're not spending it on the right things and what you identify as your priority, then it's not a priority. And don't fool yourself. There are seasons, and I'm a big believer of this. There are seasons where you need to overinvest in building a business or a career or whatever. But be honest about that with yourself,
mm,
but also be honest with your family.
yeah.
We actually had a conversation a number of years ago with the family, and we said, here's this business goal, this financial goal that we were going to go target. We sat down as a family and said, do we want to target that? And as a family, we said, no. We would rather that dad's home more. We would rather that mom's home more. We want to do these things and invest in that as a family. And so we made that decision. And I look back and I love the fact that we had that conversation as a family, but then we followed through on it. And
Mm,
so, am I as successful as I could have been if I would have made those other decisions? No, but that's only successful in the Compass Estate side.
mm.
Successful as a father, which of course is the most important thing, and a husband and friend. That's got to be the most important thing. Well, why else we do all this work?
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that. I feel it really gets to the heart of your values and what is it you prioritize. And one of the piece of advice that yeah, one of the piece of advice that really stuck to me when I was becoming a father was I talked to a few older, fairly successful business owners who repeated the same thing, and it was like clockwork. I heard it so many times that I was like, okay, there's got to be some truth here because they're all saying the same thing, and it was very simple. It's like I wish I just spent a little bit more time with my kids when they were young. Like I was so busy building this business, and I was telling myself that all of this was for my kids, all of this was for my family. But then after having achieved a lot of the things that they wanted to achieve, they wish they could just give up a little bit of that and had spent a little bit more time with their family, right? So,
100%.
yeah, I think that's so it's easy to say what you value and it's much harder to live it. And like you mentioned, through your time, through your money, and those are things that it's more concrete. It's either you did it or you didn't do it, and it holds you accountable.
Exactly.
Awesome, awesome. Well, Dan, it's been a real pleasure having you on. We'll definitely link to your website and some of the ways people can reach out to you and your team in the show notes. And yeah, really appreciate having you on.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much.